Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. Today is Thursday, April 16th, if you're listening on the day of release here, and this is episode number 180 of the Baseball Podcast, as we continue to plug along here twice a week for all you listeners out there, bringing you excellent content, both past and present. I think we got a great show lined up for everybody out there today. Standard format for those of you who have been listening over the course of the last month. The first segment, we're going to talk about the coronavirus in some detail. Dr. Anthony Fauci had some statements to say about sports returning that I want to discuss for you listeners out there. And then the second segment, we'll jump into a study. What's the best way to put this? A study done in regards to the coronavirus, to which Major League Baseball will be participating, 27 of the 30 teams. We'll get into more of the details in that study. Segments 3 and 4, our prediction segment's going to talk about the comeback player of the year for both conferences. And then finally wrap up with segment 5, do the simulation update, Stratomatic and Baseball Reference, and then closing out the show, talking about Major League Baseball, the show, quote unquote, the video game where one person from each team, they'll be doing a tournament style. I'm going to keep you guys updated on everything that's going on in that tournament, and current standings, who's doing well, who's not, the best personalities. But yeah, great show for everybody out there. So without further ado, we'll jump right in here. First segment, talking coronavirus, COVID-19, updating everybody out there on what we've talked about and what is to be expected for sports in particular. But Dr. Anthony Fauci, or Tony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert. Everybody knows Dr. Fauci by now. He's been on the news pretty much daily at this point, giving his updates on what's going on, their latest projections, targets, brackets, all of that type of stuff. He's been all over the news. So if you've been following along, you certainly know Dr. Tony Fauci. Well, he did an interview on Snapchat that's being released over the course of 2, 3, 4 days, I believe it is. The last interview is set to run tomorrow, Friday, Friday the 17th, whenever you're listening to this. If it's after that, then the full conversation has been released. If you're listening the day of release of this podcast, you got to wait 24 hours to check out the latest on what Dr. Fauci is saying. But he was asked the question around sports. Can they return? How quickly they can return? He didn't talk about particularly which one, but basically his comments stated 3 facts, which one is nobody comes to the stadium. He can't allow fans in the stadiums without a vaccine. Right off the bat, that makes me think college football is on the fritz. The NFL may play through it, but college football is on the fritz. Next up, he says basically put the players in big hotels, keep them extremely well surveillanced so you know what they're doing at all times, you know who's come in contact with whom. And then lastly, he stated test them every week, them and their families, to make sure they don't spread the disease or what's going on. Honestly, I thought that was a little bit loose. I think they're going to need to be tested, let's say 2-3 times a week, every other day. 3 times would work for myself. That's what I'm thinking. But I guess if they, nobody tests positive, you really don't need to do it that often if they've been secluded and surveilled into the hotel, such as he's talking about. But overall, that's good news. As we're in the middle of April here, we're a little bit over a month into quarantine. People are getting anxious, and he's basically stating what all of us are expecting, and that's if sports return, sooner rather than later. There's going to be no fans in any of the stadiums for any sport, as well as it's basically going to be secluded or quarantined for whatever athlete is playing that particular sport. So if baseball goes to Arizona, hockey to North Dakota, basketball's talking about Vegas, either way, it's going to be to the hotel and back, to the stadium and back, playing your game, and not much interaction. But for the money and for these players to get paid, that's where he believes, even though it isn't the greatest of situations, you'll probably garner enough support to get it done so that these guys can get paid for the season. But basically speaking on that, whether or not, Dr. Fauci or whoever out there says, hey, fans are allowed in the stadiums, let's do it, we're just going to roll, see what happens. Well, there was a recent survey done that said 72% of Americans would not attend a sporting event without a vaccine. And again, for everybody following the news out there, you know that a vaccine is 12, 18 months away, say the experts. We're all praying it's sooner than that so we can get back to normal, but 12 to 18 months is the window that a lot of the medical experts are giving us at this time. So until that point, you can throw me into that 72%. I wasn't surveyed for this particular poll, but, I'm not going to an Eagles game or a Phillies game or any game for that matter, or a concert or, any of that stuff. Until there's a vaccine, and clearly, along with 3/4 of Americans who agree with me in that sentiment. So even if they did say, hey, you can go, I'm not going. It's just going to be a hot spot for disaster. So I think people are smartening up to the fact that there's going to be no fans, whether or not they're allowed. People aren't going to go. So that was the latest update in regards to coronavirus in sports. Dr. Fauci, for the first time, asked directly by an outside source, not the national media, but an interview with a Snapchat gentleman talking sports there. But overall update on the coronavirus as a whole here, just briefly running through some numbers, keeping you guys updated. Over 600,000 in the U.S., and about 275,000 of that coming from New York and New Jersey. So still the Northeast being hit the hardest, not quite half of what it was. I believe the percentage was a little bit higher last time we discussed, but still about 40% of all the U.S. coronaviruses in New York, New Jersey, and straight up, 200,000 in New York out of 600,000, 1/3. So, about 30%, 33% right there in New York City. So really big total. It does drop off from there. Massachusetts, Michigan, Pennsylvania, California are next on the list, all in the 20s. Pennsylvania still is seeing an uptick pretty solidly around coronavirus. That's with Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, two major metropolitan areas in the state. Still, kind of flattening the curve there. Doing well in regards to hospitals and capacity, but still an uptick in cases overall. So we're slowing down. If you do look at the charts, they are definitely flatter than in the past, but, still going up. And I guess flat to the point where, looking at day to day, about 26,000 cases per day across America is looked at as a good day, and that's where we're at. So scary times definitely here in America. But transitioning here from the U.S. to internationally, there is good news when it comes to professional baseball. I know this is the Major League Baseball podcast, but here for a couple of minutes, I figured I'd discuss just some good news and some actual baseball being played out there. For those of you unaware, the CPBL, not exactly what it stands for or not sure what it stands for, but basically the Taiwan Professional Baseball League has come back, and they are playing. They are the first sport in the world, I believe, outside of ping pong, table tennis, and darts that I've come across. Certainly the first baseball professionally to be played here in 2020. There are 4 teams in the league, so it's a much smaller sample size than, Major League Baseball with 30 of them. So only 4, the number of guys, they can obviously keep it quarantined and a little bit more, or a little easier to keep everybody healthy there. But the Fubon, Fubon Guardians, they're out of the gate at 2-0. The Rakuten Monkeys, everybody knows Rakuten. They're on the Warriors jersey for advertising. They're at 1-0. The Uni Lions, they are 1-1. And the China Trust Brothers, tough start for them early on. They are 0-3 through 3 games. So if you don't know about the CPBL, head to, Google. Let's see here, CPBL Live. This is how I was able to find it and get it on the television to watch live baseball. The first one that comes up is cpblstats.com/online stream. And there it gives you a few links that'll work for you, as well as it's on Twitter moving forward. But the games themselves, they are at about 5 and 6:30 in the morning East Coast time. So for those of you on the West Coast listening out here in the Golden State market, if you're still up from the night before at 3:30 or 4, you can head to Twitter or head online to catch some actual baseball. I myself, East Coast time, like I said, getting out of bed about 7 o'clock. These ones' first pitch is 6:30, so as I'm, doing my morning routine, I've been able to tune into live baseball for the past 4 or 5 days now, and pretty much every day moving forward. That's going to be the routine until we can get it here in America. So if you're really, really hurting for some sports out there and you want to watch, check out the CPBL, live baseball, professional baseball being, taking place in Taiwan. So hopefully everybody continues to stay safe out there, stay healthy. This can be a little bit of a barrier or a barometer, for Major League Baseball to be used moving forward. So continue to check that out. We'll talk about it briefly here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. But that wraps up the first segment. We're going to pause for a word from one of our sister shows here within the network. But when we come back, I'm going to talk about the study that's being done around coronavirus in partnership with Major League Baseball. So I am Kevin Mahalik, GSMC Baseball Podcast. Hang with us for just a sec. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I appreciate everybody listening out there. If you're listening on Apple Podcast feed, do me a favor, scroll down, hit the 5 stars, leave us a review. No new reviews in between last episode and this one, so nothing to share with you guys here on the podcast. But if you do write a review, I, of course, read them. I'll read every one of them. If you leave a 1 star, tell me you don't like it, what's wrong, I'll read that as well. So all feedback is open. I appreciate everybody listening out there. Continue to help share, follow, subscribe to the podcast, as well as our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. We're on all the social media platforms. It's been fun these last couple of weeks, sharing some information, interacting on Twitter with you guys. And so please do that. It certainly helps us here with the podcast. But in that first segment, I talked to you guys about Dr. Tony Fauci and what he says. Fauci, I believe it is. Fauci. I knew I was going to mispronounce it at some point here. But he's the nation's top infectious disease doctor, and he basically said if there's going to be sports soon, there's going to be no fans, they're going to be quarantined, and there is going to be a tricky situation where they're tested at all times. But I agree with him. That's going to be the move. Everybody knows it. Everybody's been discussing it. So the fact that they're having phone conversations with a lot of the commissioners from these leagues, the Dr. Fauci, Donald Trump, President Trump, he's on them. So there is conversation being had, and everybody knows how this can help the economy come back. So they want sports sooner than later. But baseball in particular, it's just come out in the past day or so that they are going to be involved in a study involving the coronavirus. And Stanford, USC, there's another company out there, I can't remember, but essentially they've created a test that has been FDA approved. They're looking to basically create these at a mass production. But what it does is it's a blood test that tests for antibodies. And those of you listening to the news, watching the news, knows that buzzword or keyword that's been said here the past couple of weeks. They test for antibodies IgM as well as IgG, which have been found to be reactors to the coronavirus. The short-term antibody, IgM, and then the long-term antibody, IgG, are basically, if they're present, the person knows that they've had coronavirus and have since recovered. Because the hard part about this disease is how many asymptomatic people there are who contract the virus, who don't know, don't show any signs of symptoms. And that's another reason the doctors really can't put their finger on it, is because it's taking lives of some individuals, and then other individuals don't even know they have it in the first place. And that disconnect is what doctors are ultimately trying to understand. But for this particular study and particular case, it's less about understanding that and more just about gathering the intel of the actual number of people affected here in America. Because the only number we're having right now are the people who are tested positive, not the individuals who don't know. So, matter of fact, here's an example, right? The Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert tests positive, so then they test everybody around him. And Donovan Mitchell, he tests positive. Well, he never showed signs or symptoms. So Donovan Mitchell would have never known that he had the coronavirus had he not been tested in that moment. Well, not taking tests away from the front lines, from hospitals, from anybody within the healthcare world, they're able to do this study on the back end and basically say, prick your finger, put your blood on this little test piece of paper, put some solution over it, and after about 10 to 15 minutes, you're going to have what's similar to a pregnancy test result. Basically, one line or two lines pop up in this little radar area, and if you have two lines, that shows that you do have these antibodies, which means even if you feel 100% okay, you've had the coronavirus and your body responded well and just created these antibodies. If you don't have it, that means, okay, you haven't yet contracted coronavirus and you could be susceptible or because if you get it and you're healthy, there's arguments around whether or not you can get it a second time. That's not for me to discuss with you guys. Smarter people don't know the answer to that question than myself. But the reason I love Major League Baseball getting involved as well as these companies out in LA is because the 27 out of 30 teams, it gives a great snapshot nationwide about how this, virus continues to affect people. Because since they've all been relocated from Florida or Arizona or whichever spring training location they were at, went back to their individual homes, now they're scattered throughout the country. So when you ask these individuals or send it to them, and again, they can do it at home. They're basically told to do it in their kitchen. They have to fill out a short questionnaire that just asks questions around, do you know if you've been, close to somebody who has had the virus? Does anybody else in your family have it? Do you have underlying health issues? Things like that, so they can really kind of get an understanding of who, what, when, where, and why. But for 27 out of 30 teams to get involved, you would think, hey, this is an easy way to test every single one of our players, which has already happened in the NBA. They've done similar things in the NHL. Not everybody, but certain teams and certain situations have been involved. So more or less all of these guys, as well as not just the players, the front office, the people who work at the stadiums where they're located in Florida and Arizona are going to be involved with these tests. Their families as well, wives, kids, whoever they're living with will be exposed. That was the word I was looking for earlier. Whether or not they're exposed, they will test for this. So it's a positive thing for baseball. And it's also additionally positive that USC and Stanford have come out saying, hey, we've reached out to a ton of businesses, and by far, baseball has been the fastest, quickest, easiest partner to work with. And they reiterated that baseball is by no way or means doing this in order to improve or try to get back to play as quickly as possible. They're not gaining from this monetarily in any way. Baseball has just essentially said, hey, okay, you can prick your finger, you find out if you have it or not. Let's help these people find out the true spread across America. And my understanding is this needs to be deployed pretty much nationwide for everybody in my eyes. I mean, honestly, I would love to take one of these tests. I would love to know if I have asymptomatic COVID-19 or coronavirus. And Obviously I don't want to take away from the tests from people who are actually feeling ill. There's a little bit of a shortage. So there's that internal, push and pull going on with individuals. But I want to know, I would love to be tested just randomly or, without cause, I guess would be the word, because I don't have a fever. I don't have a cough. The big one I keep trying to figure out, even if I was asymptomatic, that you keep reading or hearing, is loss of taste and loss of smell. I had, throughout different points of the day, go into the fridge or something, smell some strawberries and be like, oh, okay, still smell those. Should be good here. So that's where I'm I don't know, because some people don't. You either go into the hospital or you have no idea, and testing for these antibodies will basically give you a firm confirmation. So baseball is being a good Samaritan essentially in this situation, according to the people running the test. They're not gaining anything, no money, no nothing. They just said, hey, yeah, we have the means to be able to spread this out. We can help you guys get a ton of information as quickly as possible, and we're more than willing to do that. So I'm going to follow up hopefully with some guys here over the next couple of weeks. This show, again, releasing Thursday the 16th. They hope to have all of the results back by the end of the week, Friday or Saturday of this week, so they can put together all of the information, charts, plans, questionnaires, and kind of find out and formulate what's actually going on out there with Ground Zero, because I do believe that the asymptomatic patients may be more than we believe, which means the number that I read in that last segment, what was it, 600 and some thousand, may almost be 700,000-800,000 of people who are just fortunate enough to have some sort of makeup internally that their body fought it off better than others. But shout out MLB getting done with this test, having 27 of the 30 teams do it. They're not making their players do it. They gave them the opportunity. I do want to make that statement, so it's not like they're being forced to conduct this survey. But if I was around, I'd say, heck yeah, let's do it. I want to get one of those. I want to find out if I have these antibodies. But that wraps up the second segment here. That wraps up our coronavirus talk for the week. It is Thursday, April 16th. We continue on little by little. We're getting closer and closer to getting back out there, closer and closer to baseball. We talked about it last segment. The Taiwan Professional League is back, so I'm actually watching live updated baseball, and I don't have to watch reruns from years past, the best games across all teams in the major leagues. But we're going to pause right now for a brief word from one of our sister shows here within the GSMC podcast network. When we come back, we're going to do segments 3 and 4. You guys know already. There are prediction segments. These are the last of the awards to go through. The last predictions I'll give you. We're going to talk NL Comeback Player of the Year in segment 3. So I am Kevin Mahalik. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Hang around for just a second. We'll see you on the other side.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the third segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys listening today. Those first couple of segments, we talked about coronavirus, Dr. Tony Fauci discussing how sports are going to return, whether it's football, baseball, basketball. Basically, the 3 golden rules that we've all talked about, all have assumed was going to be what takes place is no fans, quarantine players, and a ton of testing, which makes a lot of sense. But he is saying that sports should be able to return soon if they can find the availability and the opportunity to put those three things together. Then we can get back to baseball. And, of course, Taiwan, they've started playing only 4 teams in the Taiwan League, so a little bit easier for them to count the bodies. It's probably 150 to 200 instead of thousands and thousands of individuals. But I myself, as a baseball fan, and that's baseball. That's not Major League Baseball. That's not college baseball, Little League Baseball. It's baseball as a whole. It's been on in my house the last couple of mornings. First pitch is about 6:30 a.m., so in the morning till about 10. You got yourself some baseball to watch if you click on the right buttons on Twitter or the internet. We're going to continue to keep you guys updated on what's going on there. So, transitioning now to segment 3, our prediction segments. We've been doing our awards here over the last couple of weeks. We have come down to the final award that's given out by the MLB, and that is the Comeback Player of the Year award. And this one's a little interesting. We'll get into that more in the American League, but with the National League Comeback Player of the Year, it was pretty much unanimous. It was Josh Donaldson from the Atlanta Braves. He came off an injury-plagued season in 2018 to hit almost 40 dingers, 100-plus RBIs. He was excellent for Atlanta. Personally, I was worried a little bit. Is he done? Is the bat slowing up? Is he really that guy that was in Toronto? Well, yeah, he's been good. And he parlayed that into a 4-year deal with Minnesota, and we're going to be seeing and hearing his name for the next couple of years, definitely. So, other guys involved, Sonny Gray, going from the Yankees to the Reds. He kind of figured it out again. There was trouble in New York with some slider, curveball discussion, off-speed pitches, analytics. There's been excellent podcasts and conversation around what happened there in much more detail. And then the last individual, Hyun-Jin Ryu, starting pitcher for the Dodgers, was fantastic. Very, very low ERA, high amount of wins. He parlayed that into a deal with the Blue Jays, but Donaldson was the clear runaway winner in that case. Now talking about 2020, this part's a little interesting because the Comeback Player of the Year essentially can be any person at any point in their career. Doesn't have to be a rookie, a veteran, a top guy, this, that, and the third. It could be somebody coming off an injury, somebody coming off a bad year, just down stats where they bounce back. So there really isn't any formula to put together a list of individuals. So instead of top 3 long shots, usual suspects, I have been calling them here in the past couple of weeks, we're just going to give you 1 through 5 of individuals who I think would qualify with solid years for the award. And we'll start out with the individuals who I least expect to be in conversation going up to the most. In the National League, that starts out with David Price. So Price being traded from the Red Sox to the Dodgers. He was only 7-5 with a 4.28 ERA in 2019. And this 4.28 ERA was his highest since 2009, which was his first full year in the big leagues. He was with Tampa in 2008 when the Phils beat him. Go Phils. But 2009 was his first full season. He had a ERA in the mid-4s, so highest one since then. As well as he's going from a Boston team that was, okay, had to run into the Yankees. There were some problems there we all know about. Well, now he's in L.A. He's with the Dodgers. He's going to be their number 3, their number 4, depending on who you're putting in front of him. You got Buehler. Let's see here, Kershaw. There's the other guy I can't think of. But if he's their 3, that puts him down a little bit more. Expectations a little bit lowered. That offense, he could put together a very solid year. Not Cy Young worthy, but certainly Comeback Player of the Year worthy. The next individual is somebody it's tough for me to root for based on the team he's on. But as the person, the player, I'm a huge fan, and I just want to continue to root for success. And that's Felix Hernandez. King Felix, he is now with the Atlanta Braves, signed a minor league deal after his last 4 years in Seattle, where since he's turned 30, his ERA has gone up 1 run, basically from 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 to 6. Last year he was 1-8 with a 6.40 ERA, but that's also with the Seattle Mariners, who aren't very good and continue to trade away every guy they had. They traded Robinson Cano and then Gene Segura, and then they're just unloading everybody. And Felix was the guy they're going, hey, how am I supposed to win with these guys? I'm getting older. I'm supposed to be, I'm not carrying any teams anymore. You're supposed to be helping me out in this point in my career. And that's where I think Atlanta, if he wins that 5th starting spot, could do that, because the Braves are an excellent team. They got a loaded rotation in front of them, a lot of hard throwers, which Felix is not. So his 90-89 may actually be harder to hit coming off of 3 or 4 straight days facing 98-99. Yeah, as a hitter, you're going to be like, oh, thank God he's not throwing hard. But it's tough to stay back on 89 after you see 99 3 times in a row. And a good team, good offense. If he's over 500, that team wins 100 games. You could see his name being thrown into the conversation. I don't think he wins it. Once again, I don't think he has the stuff at age 34 to win it, but I don't think if he does make the major league team, he's going to be 1-8 with a 6.40 ERA. At least I hope so, because I'm rooting for you, King. So these next 3 individuals, I think, are the top 3 that could really separate themselves, and we could see at the end of the year. So in no particular order really here, starting out with Zach Cozart of the San Francisco Giants. Now, the only problem for Zach is the Giants stink and should be terrible this year. So even if he's really good and they win 60 games, it's hard for you to win this award when your team isn't very good. But he played, I think, 15, 20 games last year. He had shoulder issues, surgery. I think it was labrum surgery that he had, but he was a 2017 All-Star with the Cincinnati Reds, so people were expecting another great year last year. He gets injured, missed basically the entire season, and there you have it. He's looking to bounce back in 2020 and become an All-Star once again. Next up we have here Dellin Betances. Oh, man, I was so upset when the Phils didn't sign this guy, and even the Mets get him on 1-year discounted deal. So basically what happened, Betances lights out back end of the Yankees bullpen. Betances, Chapman, they're known as the top 1-2 punch closer, setup guy, 8-9 combination, whatever you want to call it. He has, let's see, what was his injury? He injured his shoulder. So 2018 into 2019 injures his shoulder. He works his way back, month of May, month of June, whatever it is, and gets back into game shape, game form, faces 2 hitters. His first time out there, faces 2 hitters, strikes both of them out. Straight up Ks, both of them. So then what happens? He celebrates coming off the field, does a little bit of a jump, skip, hop, whatever you want to call it out there, tweaks his Achilles. Bam, down again for the rest of the year. So this guy was fantastic with the Yankees, expected big things, shoulder injury, faces 2 guys, Ks them both, walks off strutting, does a hop, bang, Achilles goes, he's down again. So if he goes back to right where he was, he's going to be electric. He's going to be lights out. The New York Mets bullpen is going to be much, much improved. If he can bounce back, they got the closer from Seattle. I talked about Seattle shipping everybody out with Felix. They got Diaz now in New York. They got Familia coming back as well. So that back end could be strong, especially if Betances comes in and stabilizes things. With that slider, wipeout stuff, if he proves he's healthy, he's going to make money, just like Donaldson did last year. Bet on yourself, 1-year deal, light it up, get your big-time deal, and move on from there. Lastly here, I have Andrew McCutchen, Philadelphia Phils. You're a baseball fan, so you knew it was coming. Kutch last year with the Phils. He played the most games out of anybody on this list, so I was curious if he would still qualify. But 33-27 the Phillies were with McCutchen in the lineup, 48-54 without him in the lineup. So when he went down, they were in first place by a half a game over the Braves. He was a leadoff hitter. He had an excellent WAR, excellent above replacement. Then he's on first base, a pop-up. He doesn't run it out. He tweaks his knee, ACL surgery, boom. Would have missed the opening of this year, would have been returning right about now, a few weeks into the season. But now with things delayed, he's going to get the full year. And if the Phillies are in the NL East or the top of the NL East, McCutchen's going to be kind of looked at as the reason why, because a lot of people locally are pinning him as why they fell off. So if he's the reason why they're back, I think that storyline picks up steam on a national level. So ultimately, I'm going to pick Dellin Betances. I think he lights it up for the Mets, bounces back, gets his big deal. McCutchen plays every day, so there is that aspect of it if he lights it up, or Cozart out with the Giants. I think those 3 are your top bidders when it comes to the NL Comeback Player of the Year. But that wraps up the third segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, thanks for listening. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows within the network. When we come back, we're going to do the American League. I'll let you guys know who's going to win that award. Hang with us here for just a second.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to another episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. It is episode number 180. If you heard all 180 of them, shout out to you. Round of applause. Yeah, if you can hear that in the background. Round of applause. That's fantastic. If you've just been listening since I was brought on about a month ago, what is it now? 10, 12, 14 episodes. Welcome to the family. New listeners, we very much appreciate it. If you are a new listener, scroll on down, give us a 5-star review, write a review. I'll read it here on the podcast. If you've been listening, you know that. No surprise there. Let me know what you think. I haven't had to do it yet because everybody's been enjoying it, thank goodness. But if you, have a 1 or 2-star review, throw it on there. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss. We'll get everybody involved. If you want to shoot me a DM on Twitter or head to Facebook, message me on the Facebook page telling me how wrong I am about my predictions and how these comeback player of the year, or you're an idiot, let's do so. Let's have a conversation. Let's enjoy ourselves. Let's talk baseball, because that's what I love to do here with GSMC Baseball is, talk basically anything we can right now, because we're in the middle of April. We'd be 3 weeks into the actual season breaking down what's going on, talking about injuries, outings, things like that. But instead, I'm here predicting the comeback player of the year based on what's going on. So last segment, I almost said last semester, last segment, we talked to NL comeback player of the year. That was Josh Donaldson. The reason I said the comeback player of the year can be interesting is because working with Google and the internet telling me Carlos Carrasco won the 2019 AL comeback player of the year. Makes a ton of sense. He was diagnosed with leukemia early in the season, missed about 3 months, did his treatment, got back, ended up coming out of the bullpen late in the year for the Indians. He's expected to be on pace for next year. I actually had him written down for 2020 because originally when I Googled this, I went to the Sporting News, and apparently Sporting News picked somebody different than the AP or ESPN. I couldn't find out who the other one was. Well, Sporting News picked Hunter Pence as the AL comeback player of the year. He was one of the 3 people listed with Carrasco when I saw he won. So multiple awards. It just reminded me of like the late 90s with college football, where the coaches poll and the AP poll were the national champions. And in 1997, Nebraska and Michigan were co-national champions because they didn't have a game and they were each ranked first in their respective polls. So that's what I thought I was looking at here in the comeback player of the year. But for 2020, once again, giving you guys 5 names out there to watch, 5 individuals who I believe meet the criteria on what it would, mean to be a quote-unquote comeback player of the year. And this one, this is a little bit of a loaded roster. I'm going to be honest with you. The National League, the likes of McCutchen, Betances, Cozart, yeah, those are okay. Those are solid names, not top of the list names. Well, they are names in the American League. Starting off, first off, again in no particular order, because I think almost every one of these guys would have equal odds, is Lance McCullers Jr. He's coming off a Tommy John surgery. You guys remember McCullers Jr. from his postseason success in 2018 with the Astros. Yeah, he's the guy who just threw curveball after curveball after curveball, and his spin rate on his curveball is top 3% in all the major leagues, but also may have led to his Tommy John surgery in the elbow, because the curveball is the hardest one on your elbow, so if you throw 20 of them in a row, sooner or later, that ligament's going to go, and that's what happened. But he's only 26 years old, so when people have Tommy John at that age, they tend to come back, successfully and be able to, get to the level they were at previously. So Lance McCullers Jr., an ability to step up with Garrett Cole leaving the rotation. They're led at the top by Verlander and Greinke. Well, 3, 4, and 5. McCullers Jr. has been penciled in as possibly one of those individuals. Has yet to throw more than 130 innings in one summer, so not a lot of mileage on the arm, and very interesting to see how he returns. But he's at the list. Next up, Giancarlo Stanton. He only played 18 games in 2019 after lighting it up in 2018 in the Bronx. 18 games, a couple of different injuries. Man, that's only 2.5 weeks of baseball. So if he comes back 50-plus dingers again, 100-plus RBIs, the New York Yankees win 120 games, he's probably going to be looked at as, we're not going to give him the MVP, we're not going to do that whole thing, but we'll just give him comeback player of the year. We'll throw him that bone. But the limited number of games, the success in 2018, again, kind of a perfect recipe for both of them to come together in 2020. Next up here, our first pitcher on the list, and only pitcher. Oh, no, that's right. Lance McCullers is a pitcher. What am I talking about? Corey Kluber for the Rangers, the Texas Rangers. Now, Kluber only had 7 starts last year, and he got rocked in those 7 games. He then had a broken ulna. He broke a bone, essentially, missed a ton of time, was able to come back late. But Kluber's passed as a 2-time Cy Young winner, coming off a short season, broken bone, maybe a blessing in disguise when it comes to mileage on the arm. Maybe he's going to be feeling as fresh as he had in years, get back to a new off-season routine. Typically when you get injured, you kind of recenter and refocus all of your efforts. Maybe he's been able to find Pilates or yoga or something that's allowing his body to continue to perform at a high level as the age continues to creep higher and higher for Corey Kluber. But, I'm not going to write up a 2-time Cy Young winner for a Texas Ranger team opening a new ballpark, a lot of energy, Joey Gallo on the offensive side. I don't think his odds are as high as McCullers now that I'm talking about it, or even Stanton's for that matter. But outside of the box thinker right there, Corey Kluber, if he gets back to Cy Young form, there's going to be no choice but to give him comeback player of the year. Next up is the gentleman, is actually my pick. Who did I pick in the National League? I picked Dellin Betances. Well, in the American League, I'm going with Salvador Perez, Kansas City Royals. I forgot Salvador didn't play last year and had Tommy John surgery from spring training. So 13 months out, should be okay, should be fully recovered. But before last year, Salvador had made 6 straight All-Star games, and in those 6 years, he had won 5 Gold Glove awards. So for the past 6 years before last year, Salvador Perez was the best catcher in the American League. And if he returns to that form post-Tommy John surgery, there's no conversation at all around who wins the award. If he makes a 7th All-Star game, wins a 6th Gold Glove coming off an injury, you're going to say, yep, okay, he missed the entire year, but boom, that was an easy quiz. That was an easy answer. It's Perez. Whether McCullers goes 10-5, 3-something ERA, it's not a Gold Glove and it's not an All-Star. So Salvador has the inside track based on his history, his accomplishments, and where he could potentially find himself in the level he could find himself playing at when he gets back. And last up here is a guy kind of forgotten about within the Bronx Bombers. Everybody in New York remembers the name, but nationally when I saw it, I said, oh yeah, that's right, man. They're getting him back too. Is Miguel Andujar. I'm probably saying that wrong, so I'll just go with Miguel. He's third base for the Yankees, pretty much. He tore his right labrum and missed basically all of last season. But in 2018, he was Rookie of the Year runner-up to Shohei Ohtani. He finished ahead of his teammate. I believe it was Gleyber Torres as well. So, Rookie of the Year runner-up, then misses the entire season. He was obviously looked at to improve going into his second season, coming into his own, continuing to develop, continuing to get better. Well, now his second season is this year, coming off a Rookie of the Year runner-up. You got to think that confidence will be high. The Yankees are going to be fantastic. Look at that. I put 2 Yankees on the list. That's how good they were last year. They won 100 games without these 2 individuals. So what are they going to go, 120 and 40 if they play, 160 games? Maybe they take away from each other. Now that I'm thinking about it out loud here, if everybody contributes, they really can't look at one or the other. But if one significantly outperforms the other, they would have the inside track. Then you got 2 arms. So those 2, Giancarlo Stanton, Miguel Andujar. Then you got McCullers Jr. and Corey Kluber. And my personal favorite, once again, Salvador Perez, the league's best catcher the previous 5 years, coming off of Tommy John surgery. I think that lines up perfectly for him to reclaim the award and reclaim the crown of best catcher in the American League. But that wraps up the 4th segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. For those of you guys listening out there, leave us a review. Write in the review who you think's going to win Comeback Player of the Year. If you think my picks of Dellin Betances and Salvador Perez are way out of line and not even close, you have the opportunity to do so. DM me on Twitter, hit me up on Facebook. We'll have an honest discussion about what's going on. I'll read the review if you leave it that way here on the podcast. It'll be a lot of fun to get you guys to interact here. But right now we're going to pause for a word from one of our sister shows within the GSMC Podcast Network. And when we come back, it's segment number 5. You guys know what that means out there. It's the Strat-O-Matic versus Baseball Reference simulations. What's going on out there, keeping you guys updated on teams' records, basically the huge differences. I just want to see if things kind of standardize and flatten themselves out here. So hang with us here while we pause for a word from one of our other shows. We'll be right back on the other side. I am Kevin Mahalik. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, everybody, to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik, here on a beautiful, I'm recording this Wednesday on the 15th. This episode drops Thursday the 16th. Hopefully you're listening to it right when it's released. Obviously, you got it queued up. You're subscribed on any podcast feed you're listening to, so you got the alert that there's a new GSMC Baseball Podcast available, and you're checking that out. If not, that's also the beauty of podcasts. You can listen at your leisure with whatever you're doing. I myself, we're quarantined at home. My wife works a little bit more standard hours than myself, so I tend to fit in around her schedule currently with the studio, as well as the 2-year-old running around. But whenever I get the 2-year-old, down for a nap, I like to check out the podcasts, find out what I've been missing. People are still talking sports out there, even though we don't have any live sports to discuss, particularly here in America. I know I told you guys over in Taiwan, we got some live sports we're talking about. But, back in segment 1, talked about Dr. Tony Fauci. He discussed no fans in the stands, quarantine the players, test them often. Those are the 3 main pillars to getting sports back as soon as possible. Major League Baseball is partnering with a couple of different institutions, medical institutions, Stanford, USC, among others, to test for antibodies to try to find how much this virus has spread. Find out those asymptomatic individuals they've had it. Your body basically creates an antibody that'll show up in this exam, so you'll know whether or not you've been infected. The last couple of segments, we talked about the Comeback Player of the Year awards. I think it's going to be Dellin Betances, as well as Salvador Perez in the American League. But that brings us up here to segment 5 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. It's episode number 180 for those of y'all who have listened for the entirety of the podcast. But this segment, we're talking about the Stratomatic simulation, the Baseball Reference simulation, talking about the top performers, teams, kind of what's going on, where the update is. We're starting out with Stratomatic, and we'll do a little compare and contrast with the standings, team standings in the AL East, working our way around from there. That's how we'll do it out of the jump here. So, Stratomatic, they're going Tampa, New York, Boston, Baltimore, Toronto. Tampa, New York, Boston, Baltimore, Toronto. Baseball Reference is going New York, Tampa, Toronto, Boston, Baltimore. So, Baltimore and Toronto, your bottom 2 or 3. Actually, Baseball Reference not high on the Bo Sox. So basically they have New York and Tampa as the top 2. Stratomatic much higher on the Tampa Bay Rays. They have them at 13 and 6. Baseball Reference only has them at 9 and 10 with the Yankees kind of out to a commanding lead there in the East. But like we talked about on the preview pod, New York, Tampa, top 2 there, fighting for a wild card. We'll transition over to the Central here. The surprise with Stratomatic continues to be the Royals at 13 and 5. They're high on the Cleveland Indians at 12 and 7. The Twins stabilizing, coming back to 9 and 10. And then the White Sox at 5 and 13. So Stratomatic doesn't think the White Sox are ready, as to where I say they could be the surprise team in the American League, with Detroit continuing to struggle. You go over to Baseball Reference and boom, they're on my side. 13 and 5 Chicago White Sox compared to 5 and 13. So however you want the computer to run it, follow that one. But White Sox, Indians, Royals, Twins, see, they got the Twins at 7 and 12 too. So in Minneapolis, if they get off to a slow start, I guess what I'm saying is don't be surprised, because the computer models are suggesting that. But the White Sox hit or miss as well up there. So Yankees, they're confirmed. The White Sox, nobody knows. Going to the AL West, Oakland, Houston, leading the way for Stratomatic. Yes, like I said, those are the top 2, Texas, LA, and Seattle. LA, the Angels, that is, at 6 and 12. That wouldn't be, a strong start. That would be surprising to me if that's how it played out in the West. Looking over at Baseball Reference, same thing, 7 and 11 for the Angels. I don't know. I think they're going to be a little bit better than that. Maybe it's because they've played the A's and the Astros the entire time. But for Baseball Reference, having the Mariners at 12 and 7, yeah, I got to disagree with that one. So as much as I agree with the White Sox, I disagree with the Mariners being over 500. But both teams, like the Oakland Athletics here, almost 3 weeks into this season at 15 and 4 and 14 and 5. So both of them have the Athletics playing good baseball. Moving over to the National League, NL East. Washington Nationals 12 and 5, then Atlanta, Philadelphia, Miami, and the Mets rounding it out for Stratomatic. 9 and 11 for Atlanta. Ooh, that wouldn't go over well down there. Philadelphia, yeah, under 500. But again, Baseball Reference, Philadelphia, the worst team in baseball. It continues to be right there with the Padres, 5 and 14. So I don't like that as a Phillies fan, but they got the Marlins at 11 and 8. Come on, what are we doing here? Get the Marlins out of here. But the Braves 14 and 6 and 9 and 11. Slight discrepancy there. Again, I think they're better than that. So that's 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4 for Baseball Reference, where I think they're a little more in tune with what actually is going to be taking place. Going over to the NL Central, Cubbies 12 and 6, Cardinals 10 and 8, followed by Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Milwaukee. From Stratomatic, if we go over to Baseball Reference, they are much higher on the Cardinals at 12 and 6, as well as the Pirates at 10 and 8. That'd be a bit of a surprise. And they got the Cubs in last place at 7 and 11. Stratomatic first place, Baseball Reference last place. Similar thing with the Chicago. What's it with the city of Chicago? The White Sox and the Cubs, both first or last, no matter where you're at. But I think the Reds, they could surprise some teams. That's an interesting trend there within the city of Chicago. Last division, out west, here's another one. San Diego Padres 13 and 5 with Stratomatic, 5 and 13 with Baseball Reference. So the White Sox and the Padres, nobody knows. Arizona 11 and 8, the Dodgers only 9 and 9 for Stratomatic, still a slow start for them. And we go over here, Baseball Reference, Dodgers 12 and 6, Diamondbacks 12 and 7. That's where it's just the top of the list here with Baseball Reference. It makes me believe this one a little bit more than Stratomatic. So at this point, it would be Dodgers, Cardinals, Braves, Winners of the division with the Reds and the Diamondbacks as the wild card teams. In the American League, we got Yankees, White Sox, Athletics, with surprisingly the Mariners and Indians, those wild card teams with Houston on the outside looking in there. So that's fun, though. 3 weeks in. Let's transition over here now to some individual performances, starting out with the hitters. Strat-O-Matic, people still hitting over 400. I like to keep an eye on this, see how far we can go. Charlie Blackmon, Lopez from the Royals, Machado at 417, and Jimenez for the White Sox at 425, leading the league. So 4 guys still over 400. Trevor Story leading the league with 10 home runs, Jimenez with 8. So Jimenez, a heck of a start. 8 dingers, over 400. Torres for the Mets with 8. RBIs, Soler 21, Trevor Story 22, Hosmer 20. And those are your top 3 guys there, basically. So 4 still hitting over 400. 10 home runs for Trevor Story. Let's see how that compares with Baseball Reference. Let's go that way. Here we are. Batting leaders, they got Dahl from Colorado. David Dahl still leading the league in hitting. It looks like he is the only gentleman over 400, though. So, again, Baseball Reference, a little bit more normal. 1 guy over 400. Albies in Atlanta. Santander, I talked about him in Baltimore. Andujar, there you go. My comeback player of the year is hitting 368 in the Baseball Reference podcast. But home runs, Trevor Simeon, Reyes, not Jose Reyes, Franmil Reyes for the Indians at the top of the list with 9. So Story's the top dog there. Stanton with 8. That'd be good for him. RBIs, Alvarez, he's got 7 homers, but 28 RBIs. Wow, way in front of everybody else. Houston scoring a ton of runs. Cunha has 19. Upton has 19. Betts has 19, but 28 for Alvarez. A very impressive start on the offensive side. Lastly, going to the pitchers here, ERA, starting with Strat-O-Matic, Blake Snell. He'll come up here in our next segment more than once. Blake Snell, .35 ERA. Only guy under 1 left. Steven Strasburg at exactly 1. And then Minaya out in Oakland at 1.07. Odorizzi, 1.35. So still some strong starters early on here when it comes to innings pitched. We got saves. Ian Kennedy with 8. Kela in Pittsburgh with 7. Those are your top guys. Shutouts, McQuellers through 1, earned runs. Let's see here. Can I get strikeouts? Yes. Snell, 38. Aaron Nola, 38. And Garrett Cole with 37 with Strat-O-Matic. And then rounding out this segment here with Baseball Reference for pitchers ERA, Freeland at .4. Wilson in Atlanta at .6. So we got 2 guys under 1 still here with Baseball Reference. Let's see. Can I get strikeouts? Can I find it? There it is. Garrett Cole, 42. 1 ahead of Buehler at 41. And Scherzer and DeGrom right there at 37 with Verlander not far behind. So, fun segment here. Like I said, going through a surprise with the White Sox, the Cubs. Nobody knows what to expect, what's going on. We'll continue to keep you guys updated, see if the computers can kind of stabilize. And I'm very curious if they come to the same conclusion about who's going to make the postseason and who moves on, which guys, particular players have solid years. Well, hopefully we'll be talking real baseball before we get to that. But that wraps up segment 5 here, the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, hang with us here for just a sec. When we return, we're talking about the video game tournament that Major League Baseball is putting on. Sounds outrageous? Should actually be kind of fun. So stick around.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the sixth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks for listening to another great show today, everybody. I really appreciate y'all listening in, as you guys are kind of my escape here from the real world and what's actually going on. I'm able to get behind the mic, talk Major League Baseball, one of my favorite things to talk about with you guys out there, whether it's talking coronavirus, how we're going to get back to playing as soon as possible, the study that's going on with Major League Baseball and healthcare services, predicting all of the awards for you guys. Today we did the Comeback Player of the Year, talking about simulations, whatever it is. I'm enjoying it. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. If you are enjoying it, do me a favor. I know I asked you a couple of different times throughout the show here, but scroll down if you're on Apple Podcasts, hit 5 stars, write us a review. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, that's fine, because we got Twitter, we got Facebook, we got Instagram. Hit us up on there. DM me if you have any takes, comments, conversations, questions you want to talk about on the show. I can put together a segment or a show where it's nothing but questions and giving you guys my take on what's going on. I'd love to hear from you out there. I've read a couple of different reviews in episodes past, so if you put something there, get yourself on air, get yourself read for the episode here. But the sixth and final segment, we always like to have a little bit of fun here within the GSMC Baseball Podcast. And now I'm thinking there could be a new segment where we follow along here over the course of the next month, because Major League Baseball, the video game known as The Show, Major League Baseball The Show, is putting on a tournament. So there's going to be one player from all 30 teams representing their team in a round robin style. You know, it's not exactly a tournament or a bracket, but they're going to play 29 games. They're going to play everybody else one time. Every game is 3 innings. And I thought about that. I'm like, I'm not watching these guys play for an hour. That's the one thing about baseball games, is kind of like the game itself. They can move a little bit slow from time to time. So them only playing 3 innings makes a ton of sense. And it also allows them to play multiple games per day. Not everybody's playing every day, but they can, pick up the pace very quickly if they're behind in the amount of games played, because they could play 3, 4, 5 games in the matter of 24 hours. So 29 games, 3-inning games, multiple games per day. Where can you watch these, Kev? Good question. You can actually head to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, all 3 platforms. Twitch individually for the players themselves. Then Major League Baseball YouTube kind of puts on a home base style of show. There's a couple of commentators that work in between the matchups, ask questions of the guys during the shows or during the games themselves. And that's a great way to watch it. So if you go to YouTube or Twitch, even Facebook, the website itself, MLB.com/Players League, will give you all the information you need to know and keep you updated. But I'm going to run through the names on who's playing. We're going to try to keep it brief here. Again, it's 30 names, kind of give me an update on what's up, a little conversation. But they break it down here by division. So kind of, status quo here, starting in the AL East. Like last segment, they got Bo Bichette for Toronto, Blake Snell for Tampa, Dwight Smith Jr. for the Orioles, Eduardo Rodriguez for Boston, and Tommy Cannell for the New York Yankees. And I read those in order. Bichette, he's 7-1 so far. Blake Snell, 6-2. Dwight Smith Jr., 3-1. Eduardo Rodriguez, 1-7. And Tommy Cannell at 0-4. And, just briefly out of those guys, Blake Snell, I'm becoming a huge fan of Blake Snell. And if you follow our Twitter feed, I've retweeted a lot of information, a lot of videos that Blake has put out there during this tournament. And some of the stories he tells or conversations he has are absolutely hilarious. There's a story he talks about out there. He's playing Joey Gallo, who's the Texas representative. We'll get to him later. But he's telling a story about how Gallo one time lays down a bunt down the third base line, because Gallo's one of these guys that faces the shift on every at-bat. So he steals a single on a bunt as a 4-hole hitter. And Blake is basically like, and I'm like, dude, come on. Are you kidding me? And then next time up, he crushes a ball. And actually the terminology was mollywopped. He mollywops this ball 800 feet over the center field fence, right field fence. And if you look up the video on the story he's talking about, it is quite hilarious. First inning, second inning bunt, fifth, sixth inning mammoth home run. It's just like, dude, if you can hit a ball that far, why are you even bunting? And, I'm a proponent of, hey, bunt, steal a single every now and then. But Blake's personality is really showing, and he's gaining a lot of fans when it comes to kind of behind-the-scenes stuff here. So, jumping to the AL Centro, Nico Goodrum, he's 3-1. Trevor May, Nico Goodrum's for the Tigers, 3-1. Trevor May for the Twins, 4-3. Lucas Giolito, 2-2 for the White Sox. Brett Phillips for Kansas City at 2-2. And Carlos Santana has yet to play at 0-0 via the Indians there as well. So, some good personalities there. Trevor May, he's a good dude. I've met him a couple of times. I had, breakfast with one of the guys he was talking about. He drops a bomb with Max Kepler, and he goes, there's a reason why all the women in the stands wear rocking Kepler jerseys. And I'm like, Kepler's a good dude. I've had some brunch with him when I'm meeting with some buddies on the road. But let's go AL West. I said Joey Gallo earlier. Gallos is the most impressive guy here early on, that's for sure. He's 8-0. He's crushing baseballs, even with himself. It's kind of funny to watch Joey Gallo crush baseballs with Joey Gallo on MLB The Show. But, tune in for that. Carl Edwards Jr. is 3-5 for Seattle. Lance McCullers Jr. 2-6 for Houston. Jesus Luzardo 1-3 for Oakland, and Ty Buttrey 1-7 for Atlanta. Buttrey in the basement at 1-7. So Joey Gallo, very impressive early on. He was laughing his tail off when Blake Snell was talking about that, because you could see he remembered it and was just like almost embarrassed, not embarrassed, but just, kind of getting red in the face going, yeah, I did that. I got you, bro. I got you. So, let's see, 29 total games. We're at a mix from 8 to under on. I believe they're trying to wrap things up here by the month of May. But let's transition over here to the National League, see who's representing these guys. We got Jeff McNeil, NL East. He's 6-2 with the New York Mets. Rhys Hoskins, what up, Rhys? Rhys is 5-3 for the Philadelphia Phillies. Luke Jackson, 3-5 for the Braves. Juan Soto, he's fun too. He's an entertaining watch on this. It makes sense. The kid's only 20, 21 years old. So, acting like he's in college. Well, yeah, he's actually the age of being in college. He just happens to have a World Series championship already, so no big deal for Juan Soto. But then we got Ryan Stanek at 2-6 for the Marlins. So Jeff McNeil at the top of the list. Come on, Rhys, let's go. 5-3, that's a good start. I'll give Rhys that. The top 8, we got 6 divisions, so it's probably your 6 winners, I would assume, unless it's overall record. I actually didn't find that out, but it's going to be an 8-man playoff. So Rhys is right there. Flirting with the 8 spot right about now. He'd be in there if I'm doing all the math correctly here real quick. But NL Central, Amir Garrett for the Cincinnati Reds. That's right, that Amir Garrett who went in to fight the Pirates last year. He's a character on the show as well. He was talking trash because he had 1 out left to get against the guy he was playing, and he gave the controller to his fiance to play, who has no idea how to play, and she still got the last out. So he was talking smack, laughing his tail off on Twitch. That was fun to watch. Ian Happ for the Chicago Cubs is 3-1. Matt Carpenter's 2-2 for the Cardinals. Cole Tucker 1-3 for the Pirates, and then Josh Hader 0-3 for the Brewers. Here's to hoping Josh can figure it out a little bit and get out of the basement, because he's fun to watch. So NL West, Fernando Tatis Jr., one of the up-and-coming stars in Major League Baseball. So if you want to get some behind-the-scenes interaction and conversation with Tatis, follow him on Twitch. It's a great way to do so. He's 3-1 for the Padres. Gavin Lux, 3-1 for the Dodgers. I had him potentially as the Rookie of the Year. John Duplantier, 4-4 for the Diamondbacks. David Dahl, 1-2 for Colorado. And then Hunter Pence back in San Francisco at 1-3 for the Giants overall. So this has been a ton of fun, kind of following along now, honestly. There's games just about every day. Wednesday night, they start at 9 p.m. Doesn't matter which day. Thursday, Friday, you're listening to this here. If you tune in, again, watch on Twitch, Facebook. You can watch the individual player, their side of things. YouTube kind of puts both guys together. But 9 o'clock Eastern time, if you head to Twitch, head to MLB.com Players League, you can follow your favorite player, your hometown team, and have some fun interacting with them on the social media. There's been a ton of personalities that are being unleashed behind the scenes. Like Trevor May is a funny dude. Like I said, Blake Snell's a character. We all know about Hader in Milwaukee. Soto showing some, chops. Joey Gallo crushing baseballs. So it's been fun to watch, and it's been fun to follow along. And I'm going to keep you guys updated out there on all of the different things going on. But that wraps it up for this segment. That wraps it up for this episode. That wraps it up for this week here within the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. One last time, I'll ask you, head to social media, like, rate, review, follow, anything you guys do out there to spread the word. We certainly appreciate it. I know I'm working hard behind the scenes to bring you guys quality content, so if you appreciate it, let me know. Give me a like, give me a review. We'll discuss it here on the show. If not, we'll talk about that too. It's not all the good stuff. We'll keep it real, here within the podcast world. But hopefully y'all have a nice weekend out there. Continue to stay home. Continue to stay safe. And that way I can talk to you guys again next Monday with another episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have yourselves a good rest of the night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.